Majora's Mask, the direct sequel to one of the timelines from Ocarina of Time. In our timeline, though, this game came out in the year 2000 and was not beaten by me until the year 2022. Originally released on the Nintendo 64, we can see this game on multiple platforms today. It has been released on every major Nintendo home console in some form, as well as getting a remake on the 3DS. We will be talking specifically about the Wii Virtual Console version of the game today. As far as I'm aware, the Wii VC version is a direct port of the original N64 version of the game. I could be wrong, but I couldn't really find any information on the subject. We'll start off with my brief history on the game. I first played it around the release on the N64. Being a dumb child, I was unable to make it out of Clocktown. I hated the time mechanic. I couldn't understand the story like I could with Ocarina of Time. I tried to pick the game back up in middle school by borrowing a friend's copy and finally made it out of Clocktown, but just was not enjoying the time mechanic once more. I eventually gave up as I couldn't wrap my head around this concept. I attempted to play through it once more on the 3DS when that version came out. I actually progressed quite a ways through the game, making it all the way to the entrance of Stone Tower Temple, but losing interest for one reason or another. That brings us to now. My first full completion of Majora's Mask. I was always fully aware of the hype around Majora's Mask, friends constantly telling me to play through it, seeing it as people's favorite Zelda game or a very close second. I could just never understand it, but I get it now. Finally playing through the whole game, I get it. Majora's Mask really set itself apart from Ocarina of Time. The concepts, the themes of the game, the gameplay. Even with most of the game being reused assets, it was able to pave its own path and create a brilliant game. Now, I won't be going full lore dump or going heavy into the themes or anything. This is purely based on my playthrough and thoughts as I was playing through it. As a bonus, I will be talking about some of the many theories that Majora's Mask has accumulated over the years, and my thoughts on some of these theories, and how I see how they fit into the game and lore of the series as a whole. We'll start this off with a rudimentary retelling of the story. Child Link gets lost in a forest on his search for his fairy Navi, who left at the end of Ocarina of Time. He gets ambushed by a Skull Kid who proceeds to take his horse and Ocarina. This Skull Kid is already in possession of the titular Majora's Mask. He then proceeds to turn you into a Deku Scrub with the power of the mask. You find your way out of the woods and meet with the Happy Mask salesman, who offers you your humanity back if you can get your Ocarina back. He only offers this so you can retrieve Majora's Mask back for him. After you get your Ocarina back, he turns you back into a human and dons the Deku Mask on you to freely transform whenever you like. This allows Link to leave Clocktown and set off on his adventure to save the world of Termina. From here, you would use your new mask powers to traverse the southern swamp and enter the Deku Palace, where you take it upon yourself to save the Deku Princess, who is trapped in the Woodfall Temple. Here is where you will meet your first boss, Odwalla. Once defeated, an unusable mask will drop showing this feat. After finishing Woodfall, you will then be going to Snowhead, where you will collect your second transformation mask, the Goron Darmani. After thawing out the frozen Goron Elder, you head to Snowhead Temple, where you meet the second boss, Goat, once again collecting an unusable mask. The third area is the Great Bay, where you collect your third transformation mask, the Zora Mikau. Using this mask, you can now infiltrate the pirate fortress to save the Zora eggs and unlock the transportation to Great Bay Temple. This is where you meet the third boss, Georg, again dropping an unusable mask. The final area of the game is Ikana Canyon. Deep inside this canyon lies the Stone Tower Temple. After doing the trade quest with some Gibdos, you can make your way into Ikana Castle and defeat the Skeletals that are holding a song needed to continue. After this, you make your way to Stone Tower Temple, where you face off with the final dungeon boss of the game, Twin Mold. Finally, with all 4 of your unusable masks, you make your way to the Clock Tower once more to wait for the final night to call the Giants. This is where the mask takes over and you get swooped up to the moon to fight the final boss of the game, Majora and his multiple phases. Once this is done, you and the Skull Kid become friends. The end. So with that out of the way, we can start talking about my thoughts on the game. Since most reviews do positive, then negative, I'll start with the negatives, or my issues with the game. I'll start off with the biggest issue I had with the game, the save function. You can only save at owl statues, or when you go back in time. Saving at the owl statues is a one-time save, so if you go back into the game from an owl statue save and don't save again before turning off the game, that file will go back to the last point it hard saved at. Hard save as in the last time you went back in time and the game saved. At least that was my experience with it. With a proper save system, I don't think I would have had as many issues as I did while playing through it now or when I was younger. Not being able to save midway through a dungeon or save warping kind of dampened the experience. Since I was streaming through this playthrough, I felt like I either had to keep pushing longer than I had planned to stream because I was in the middle of something without a save area near me, or I had to hold off on starting something because once I started, I wouldn't be able to stop again for some time. It was just a very frustrating experience for myself. As for the next issue I had with the game, it makes sense logically, but it was a large annoyance in the game itself. Going back in time changes the world back to where it was on day one. Like I said, logically, this makes sense. You go back in time, and everything you have done is erased. Any bosses or world events have been reverted back to their original state and must be completed again. Examples of this would be any post-boss states the areas are in, or the big boulder in front of Romani Ranch. Once these are done once, they aren't really necessary to do again, and the game makes getting to the bosses easier with a warp in the main room of the temple, but it's just a small annoyance if you forget something somewhere and have to go through a whole process to get it back to where it was before you went back in time. I will state again that this makes 100% sense logically. The next negative kind of goes along with the previous one. So you have the ability to upgrade your sword. Once to the Razor Sword, which looks dope but breaks after 100 uses, and then upgrading that sword to the Gilded Sword. This process takes all 3 days essentially to be done. When I first did it, I didn't realize that going back in time would revert the Razor Sword back to normal. After that happened, I decided not to finish this questline as I assumed the same would happen with the Gilded Sword. During stream, one of my friends provided me with information that the Gilded Sword, for whatever cool lore reason, is not reverted when going back in time. So why the Razor Sword and not the Gilded Sword? I personally have no idea. That bothered me quite a bit, but at least once you get it done, you don't have to worry about that again. I don't think I had any more issues with the time travel system, so we can move on to actual gameplay elements and level design. The first issue here was the tower puzzle in Snowhead Temple. Maybe I was just tired, maybe I'm just dumb, but that took me way too long to figure out. You just punched the things. That's it. I was going around the temple over and over again, trying to figure out what I was missing, and it was just a simple fix. That was stupid of me, but also I don't like it. The next one would be the Zora eggs. My god, that was a tedious task. Me just going through the story without doing much extra, I had 2 whole bottles at this point. You have to collect 7 Zora eggs in total. That means I had to make 4 trips to the lab once I started this sequence. I had to go back to the Pirate's Fortress twice, and to Pinnacle Rock twice. It was not a fun part of the game. If you want me to have more bottles, then give them to me. Don't hide them behind some beaver, or wherever else the other bottles are. Speaking of fish, Georg was the worst boss in the game. It was the only one I actually struggled with throughout my playthrough. The swimming physics of Zora Link mixed with the fish having Dark Souls-like tracking abilities really made this a tough fight for me. That was one of only like 2 times I used save states too. I was tired of running to that room over and over again. Maybe I'll count my deaths and put them on screen as like a montage. We'll see what happens during editing. The forced trade sequence with the Gyptos. That was possibly worse than the Zora eggs. Not only did I still just have 2 bottles, but you had to solve these simple riddles to decipher what they wanted. My brain overthunk some of these and left me stranded for a little bit. I think the worst part about this, though, is that you have to actually leave the dungeon space you're in to collect these items. Correct me if I'm wrong, but only a few of these items could actually be found inside. Oh, and it's also a maze. So you could go the complete wrong way and be chasing after items you don't necessarily need. Guess what? That happened to me. The final thing I didn't really like was the use of the Elegy of Emptiness to climb the entrance of Stone Tower. Now, it's not hard to do, it's just very time-consuming. It's more annoying than anything, really. Sure, you can make it up in one go, and I did in all of my attempts. The puzzle itself wasn't hard either. The issue I take with it is the wait. You have to play this song at least 9 times on your way up. Writing this post-play, and I kinda blocked this out of memory because of how much of a drag it was. Oh, and the game soft locked when I made it up the first time, so I had to do it a second time without the owl statue. Okay, enough negative stuff. We can move on to the parts I thought the game excelled at. The first of which being the story. Story overall was very good, and I think it was well put together. It had great pacing, even when some sections felt slow. The themes and lore were great as well. It's a dark story built around death and destruction throughout the world of Termina. Each transformation mask you get is based on one of the races in the world, and each mask was built from the soul of a dead being. I'm not too sure if the normal masks are based on this, but it is somewhat likely from the way we acquire a few masks throughout the game. Next is the concept of time within the game. It's a very interesting concept, and it plays into the story very well. I mean, the whole story is practically based around the use of the time system. When I was a kid, I thought this was the worst part of the game, but playing it now, it definitely adds the sense of dread and looming disaster upon the player. Can you finish the dungeon in time? Will you be able to get what you need done during the next cycle? It's always looming over you, and you have to pay attention so you don't go too far. Another thing that goes along with the time is the hidden songs that are briefly explained to you by a scarecrow. You can either skip time to the next morning or night, or you can slow down the flow of time. I, of course, use the slow time, since I wanted to push the time construct away just a little bit. I really enjoyed the world of Termina itself. The simplicity of Clocktown being the center attraction of the area, where everyone would come together on the final night. You had Deku, Gorons, Zora, and Human all congregating for the festival, all while the moon sits overhead waiting to terminate Termina. The characters throughout the world were interesting as well. While they took the guise of OOT characters due to being developed in a short amount of time, they took those characters to a different level. Most, if not all, have different names than the previous. You have the crazy happy mask salesman, who is an actual weirdo. The dude gets off on masks for sure. You have Romani, who uses the model for Malin. You have the witch sisters in the swamp, who are nice and offer a cruise to show off the swamp. You get the point. It repurposed models as all new characters, which heavily fed into many theories about the game. Another one to go with the world is that it has secrets and stories in almost every nook and cranny of the map. Side quests hidden away that only the most avid explorers and time travelers can uncover. Unfortunately, during my playthrough I didn't do much of any of the side quests, but I do applaud them for having so many in the world. Maybe next time I play the game I'll try to go for 100%. The music in this game is wonderful. I don't think there was a single song in the game that I grew tired of hearing. Here are some samples of my favorite songs that will most definitely get random people to claim this. Good thing I don't have monetization, or I'd actually be upset at YouTube's shitty policy about this. We'll move deeper and head into the dungeons for some things I thought they did a pretty good job at. The first being the fairy chests. These completely optional chests that had a different texture to show what was inside of them. If you so choose, like myself, you can skip them entirely. After attempting to collect all of them in Windfall, I kind of gave up, but it's a very neat concept. It adds some more depth and reason to explore the dungeons again after completing them. Like the gold Skulltulas from OOT, but I feel like they did a better job with it this time around. I didn't really have any issues about the dungeon design. Actually, I think they did a very good job at building them and making them enjoyable to play through. The biggest one I was worried about was Stone Tower Temple. I had heard everyone's horror stories about how bad and confusing this temple was. Its entrance is also the point where I stopped on the 3DS version some years ago. I went into it ready to lose my mind, and honestly, it was probably the easiest dungeon to navigate. I think I had one moment of confusion, but that was due to my own fault missing a key in a very visible chest. I think this was probably my favorite dungeon of them all, besides the climb to the entrance. It had what I consider to be the best boss in the game, Twin Mold. Big flying wormies that you can wear the giant's mask for and become large Child Link. As a really cool mini-boss, the dungeon itself is really fun to traverse, and it has the interesting concept of being able to turn the whole thing upside down. Definitely my favorite. And we can't forget the big epic finale of the game. They really did this one well. Not only do you get to transport to the moon, but you have the ability to, depending on the amount of masks you collect, get one final mask on the moon. The Fierce Deity Mask. Good old adult Link recolored with a cool sword and armor. The moon, much like our moon here on Earth, is a large grass field with one single tree and some kids playing in masks. The whole game leads up to this moment. Link facing off with the final mask to save Termina from the evil it holds. Majora's Mask is the final boss. The mask has embodied the evil spirit it holds and becomes some gangly meat spaghetti monster. This fight has multiple phases, with each one changing how the mask looks and acts. By the end, it has legs, arms, and a single eyeball. For a final boss, I did think it was pretty easy, but it made me feel like I actually progressed in strength throughout the game. With my sword upgrade and heart containers, I was able to beat Majora on my first attempt with the help of a couple fairies. The boss arena is pretty wild though. Just this large, pulsing, ethereal room. It's something I wouldn't mind hanging out in every once in a while. So that's it for my review section. All in all, as the first time playing through the whole thing, I had a very pleasant experience, where the positives heavily outweigh the few negatives. I had a ton of fun exploring the world of Termina, and basically experiencing an old Zelda game for the first time. I would highly recommend it if you're a Zelda fan, or an adventure game fan in general. On a scale, since it's not a real review without one of those, I would give it a clean 8.5131214. Or rounded down to just 8.5. I take my scales very seriously. So it's been like a week now since beating the game, and I genuinely want to play through it again already, considering trying a rando, but I have zero knowledge of the game, so that probably won't be fun. I just wanted to cut in and say that. I think each video will have a different end segment. With my Pokemon Snap video, I talked about speedruns and tricks for the second half. For this one, I will be going over some of the wild fan theories. This is now a MatPat special, so sit down and buckle up and get ready for a short ride through some of these theories. The first one I'll cover is probably the single most popular out of all the theories. The theory claims that the story of Majora's Mask is Link going through the 5 stages of grief, claiming that Clocktown is denial, Woodfall is anger, Snowhead is bargaining, Great Bay is depression, and finally that Ikana Valley is acceptance. The overarching theme of this theory is almost always that Link is in purgatory and that this is his acceptance of death. I'll go through and try to relate how I see these in my own way throughout playing the game. First, with Clocktown. I know people see it in a much deeper way, but the way Link is denied an exit out of Clocktown initially, as well as some of the conversations that can be heard throughout the town, kind of drive it for me. The main one being a literal denial of the moon falling onto the town. I'm a simple person, so this holds up so far for me. The next would be Woodfall. Anger is definitely present compared to most other places in the game. You get thrown out if you're not a Deku. Scrubs are on the hunt regardless of if you are. The actual king is superheated and willing to kill a monkey because of his own anger. So yeah, that checks out as well. Snowhead being bargaining, I could definitely see, because each character is asking Link for some sort of help in exchange for something else. Even Darmani is wishing for himself to still be alive at this point, another one checked off for yes. Great Bay is definitely depressive, the start of it being your attempt to save Azora, and him dying right in front of you. Lulu is so upset about the eggs that she can't even talk. The trapped and lonely seahorse who only wants to be back with its mate. The depression I got from Georg beating my ass a million times. Check and check. The final stage, Ikana Valley, the Valley of Death. The one place in the game with a graveyard and spooky skeletons. The reunification of father and child. Link using the light to free tormented souls. The final boss being Terminal 7 brainworms. Elegy of emptiness, leaving oneself behind. I definitely think this holds up. With my experience playing through the game, I would give this theory a theory confirmed. I was going to talk about an interview Aonuma did with Game Informer that briefly touched on this theory, and Aonuma's thoughts on it, but considering I can't find the proper source for it, I will not be talking about it in this video. Another interesting theory is that the Link from this game, and subsequently OOT, is the hero's shade in Twilight Princess. Some claim that this was due to Link being lost in the Lost Woods after the finale of Majora's Mask, while others claim that it is just Link's spirit once he passed on from the world. Either way, it's a very interesting theory. The original theory I saw years ago was one that claimed Link had gotten lost after his travels to Termina, as he was attempting to find his way back to Hyrule. We learn in OOT, through a Kokiri named Fado, that those who enter Lost Woods and remain for too long will be transformed into either a Stalfos or Skull Kid, depending on the age of the person that enters. This is probably the only part of the theory that kind of falls off for me. If we are to believe this, then Link would need to be an adult to turn into a Stalfos, which is what the hero's shade more closely resembles. The last time we see this Link, he is still a child and quite far from growing into an adult. As far as I'm aware, Skull Kids do not grow into Stalfos. All in all though, I would say this is highly plausible, if not 100% correct, based on the backstory of the hero's shade, being that they were a hero who once saved Hyrule. As for the final theory I'll be talking about, it's actually two that I find interesting that revolve around the fierce deity's mask. Many theories revolve around this mask, way too many for me to cohesively talk about, but the main questions trying to be answered are generally, who is it? What does it represent? Well, where does it come from? Why does some kid on the moon have it? The first one being that fierce deity could be the Link from Skyward Sword, claiming that it's possible that when he perished, a mask was left behind. Interesting, but I'm not totally buying it. Definitely a plausible theory though. The second one is a theory revolving around something that Aonuma had mentioned in an interview when asked about the fierce deity mask. I said earlier I wouldn't be using this interview because I can't find the source, but this theory is too good to pass up. He stated, "The best I can give you is just a suggestion. The best way to think about it is that the memories of all people of Termina are inside of the fierce deity mask." Now, just reading that, I didn't really come to a specific conclusion about what this could mean. The theory states that these are all of the bad memories and negative emotions from the world of Termina that Majora has caused all together in this one mask, and that it takes on the look of Link, possibly because Link is the one who solved all of the people of Termina's problems. This one I can get behind, not only due to the interview, but it fits so perfectly in the world to me. I give this one a possible. Well, that's it for my review and TED Talk on Majora's Mask. I do appreciate you watching. Now go play some Majora's Mask and enjoy the world that it puts you in. I know I'll be replaying it much sooner than I expected.